question about Egypt here. I've always been intrigued by some of the earliest examples of art used for Christian purposes, and those are those that are found in the catacombs of Rome, and most of them dated around 150 to 250 AD. And in these depictions, Jesus is portrayed short-haired, clean-shaven, and performing his miracles with what is, we might describe as a magic wand. These depictions, especially when Jesus is portrayed raising Lazarus, precisely match Thoth or Tahuti in Egypt raising Osiris. Have you looked into the connection between this relationship of Thoth raising Osiris and Jesus and the raising of Lazarus?
Well, I certainly think that the raising of Lazarus is a sort of a garbled version of one of Jesus's initiations, put it that way. And certainly in ancient Egypt, the priests used these wands. They had a whole different range of wands. If you go into the temples and look at the chapels where, especially the Osiris chapels, especially at the Temple of Seti I at Abydos, there's some beautifully colored
one of my favorite places,
depictions
certainly.
of this. You can see that there's all kinds of different wands depending on which part of the ritual they're involved in. Now, the Osiris raising ritual, or the bringing of the king to the state of Osiris, is one thing, but I think what we can also understand is more people other than the king himself also went through this ceremony, also had this ritual. And the Egyptians certainly were involved in rituals taking people, presumably other priests. I don't know how far this moved into the public arena, but at least other priests across to this other world. They allowed them to have this experience, and there's these underground crypts in many of the temples, and many of which I've been into, where it's my belief that this is where the ceremonies took place, because we have certain writers have mentioned these secret rooms where by candlelight these rituals are conducted. There's little tidbits of information, because this material was all very secret, we have to understand. People weren't allowed to talk about it, and so we just have snippets emerging here and there in particular writings, and I've brought a few of these snippets together in the book so that we can see how it progresses.
And speaking of initiation and tunnels, I was on the edge of my seat reading your chapter 10 called Initiation, about going into the tunnels at Baia in northern Italy.
Oh, Baia's the most amazing place I've ever been. And of course, you know, it's my friend Robert Temple, who's just had a book published, I think, in the States, which spends a lot of time describing his work with Baia. It's just a truly amazing place, and just I absolutely want to excavate it, because it's filled with rubble. The underground temple was all sealed up after having been filled with rubble, and I think they would have just smashed all the objects up inside it and put the rubble on top, because if they were so scared of this place, which they clearly were, they wouldn't have wanted to take those objects out, because they would have perhaps been too superstitious to have them with them. So I think underneath all the rubble there's going to be everything there. That's my hope. And hopefully Robert and I will get the chance.
And you were the first person in, over 1,500 years to enter some of the deepest parts of this tunnel system?
Well, actually, I think I was the second. I think one other person... well, I don't know, because I found some things there which the person who first found it in the early 60s and is now dead, and the Italian government sealed this underground complex up, and it wasn't until 20 or 30 years later that Robert Temple got permission to reopen it. And Robert and I went in again for the first time. I crawled along these little tunnels which had about 18 inches between the top of the rubble and the top of the tunnel, and I found a few things down there which hadn't been reported before, so it's quite possible that the two people who first discovered it didn't go down those tunnels, or at least didn't get to the end of them. But you know, even if they did, Robert and I were still probably among the first half dozen in 2,000 years to get down into those. They're truly extraordinary.
Absolutely.
It's a wonderful thing to be going hundreds of feet down this narrow tunnel deep into a cliff face, and then to find an underground river and an underground temple and tunnels leading off in all kinds of directions, some of them filled with rubble, and so we don't know where they go. And there's obviously other tunnels there that we could find, because there must be other entrances and exits to this place. It's totally enigmatic. And the main tunnel runs absolutely east-west. It's a feat of engineering, to say the least.
Right, and we actually we interviewed Robert Temple. He'll on his book Oracle of the Dead. We highly recommend it. I mean, truly an astounding work. And I wasn't aware of your friendship before that, but now I have a new admiration for it. And I think it's just absolutely wonderful the way the two of you collaborated on this project.
I mean, Robert's been a good friend of mine for some years, and we have a lot of dialogue on these subjects. I'd love to recommend his book. I can't recommend his book highly enough. It's brilliant.
Absolutely.
As are all his books, I have to say.
Oh, truly phenomenal intellect. I mean, we're so fortunate to have him as writing and as well as you. And on that subject, you're probably still looking for a breather from all of the recent publicity and all of that. And once again, we truly appreciate you taking time to talk with us. What might be next for Michael Baigent?
Well, I'm off. I've got a massive research which I'm trying to structure and find a way through, and allow me to know where I need to continue my research. I'm working on a new book which hopefully will be out next year, but I've, with all this distraction of the court case against the Da Vinci Code, I've sort of lost about 6 months as a result of that, and I'm just now getting back into my own writing rhythm again. So hopefully it won't be too long before I'm back on track and working on a new book. But,
by the way, one of my favorites was The Elixir and the Stone. Maybe you'll go back into some of those areas again?
Oh, I'm really glad to hear you say that. That book is one of my favorites as well. Absolutely.
This has been Whitley Strieber's Dreamland. Thanks very much for listening. We'll be back next week with another journey to the extreme edge of controversy on Dreamland. Do not miss it.